Imagine becoming king at just 20 years old, defeating every army that stood before you, conquering the greatest empire on earth, and creating a kingdom stretching over 3,000 miles. This is the incredible story of Alexander the Great, the undefeated warrior who changed history forever. Alexander was born in 356 BC in the ancient kingdom of Macedon. His father was Philip II, one of the greatest military leaders of his time, while his mother, Olympias, believed her son was destined for greatness. From an early age, Alexander displayed extraordinary intelligence and courage. At just 13 years old, his father hired the famous philosopher Aristotle as his personal teacher. Aristotle taught him philosophy, science, medicine, geography, mathematics, and literature. Alexander especially admired the legendary hero Achilles and dreamed of becoming an even greater warrior. One day, a wild horse named Bucephalus terrified every trainer in the kingdom. Alexander noticed the horse was frightened by its own shadow. He calmly turned the horse toward the sun, mounted it, and rode away. His amazed father reportedly said, "My son, seek a kingdom worthy of yourself. Macedonia is too small for you." Those words would soon become reality. In 336 BC, tragedy struck. King Philip II was assassinated during a royal celebration. Only 20 years old, Alexander suddenly became king. Many Greek cities believed the young ruler would be weak. They rebelled immediately. Alexander responded with incredible speed. He crushed every uprising and destroyed the city of Thebes after it revolted. The destruction shocked the rest of Greece. No one dared challenge him again. Now Alexander could pursue the dream his father had begun: the conquest of Persia. In 334 BC, Alexander crossed the Hellespont into Asia with around 40,000 soldiers. Waiting for him was the mighty Achaemenid Empire, ruled by Darius III. The Persian Empire stretched across 3 continents and possessed enormous wealth. Many believed Alexander had no chance. His first major victory came at the Battle of the Granicus River. Despite difficult terrain, Alexander personally led the charge across the river, inspiring his soldiers to victory. A year later came the Battle of Issus. Although Darius had a much larger army, Alexander attacked directly toward the Persian king. When Darius fled the battlefield, his entire army collapsed into chaos. Alexander captured Darius's family, but treated them with respect, earning admiration across the region. Alexander continued south, laying siege to the heavily fortified island city of Tyre. The city seemed impossible to capture. Instead of giving up, Alexander ordered his army to build a massive stone causeway across the sea. After 7 months, his forces breached the walls and captured the city. He then marched into Egypt, where he was welcomed as a liberator. The Egyptians crowned him pharaoh. During his stay, Alexander founded the city of Alexandria. It would become one of the greatest cities of the ancient world, famous for its library and lighthouse. In 331 BC, Alexander faced Darius one final time at the Battle of Gaugamela. Despite being heavily outnumbered, Alexander used brilliant tactics to split the Persian army apart. Darius fled once again. The Persian Empire had fallen. Alexander entered the magnificent cities of Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis. He had become ruler of the largest empire on earth. Most kings would have stopped. Alexander wanted more. He marched through modern Afghanistan and Central Asia, conquering kingdom after kingdom. Eventually, he entered India. There he faced one of his toughest opponents, King Porus, at the Battle of the Hydaspes River. War elephants charged Alexander's army. The fighting was fierce. Alexander won the battle, but was deeply impressed by Porus's bravery. When asked how he wished to be treated, Porus famously replied, "Like a king." Alexander respected his courage and allowed him to continue ruling his kingdom. Alexander wanted to march even farther east. He dreamed of reaching the end of the world. But after nearly 10 years of constant warfare, his exhausted soldiers refused. They had marched thousands of miles. Many had not seen their families for over a decade. Despite his disappointment, Alexander finally agreed to turn back. His greatest conquest had reached its limit, not because he was defeated, but because his army could go no farther. In 323 BC, Alexander returned to Babylon. Only months later, he became seriously ill after a banquet. After nearly 2 weeks of suffering from a high fever, he died at just 32 years old. Historians still debate the cause of his death. It may have been illness, infection, or another natural cause, though legends of poisoning have persisted without conclusive evidence. Alexander never named a clear successor. Soon after his death, his generals divided the empire among themselves. Although his empire fragmented, his influence never disappeared. Greek culture spread across Europe, Africa, and Asia during the Hellenistic Age, shaping art, science, architecture, philosophy, and language for centuries. More than 2,300 years later, Alexander the Great remains one of history's greatest military commanders. He never lost a single battle. His name became a legend. Was Alexander the greatest conqueror in history? Or did his endless ambition ultimately cost him everything? Let us know your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories from history. At the end of the 18th century, Europe was in chaos. Kings feared revolution. Armies marched across borders. Empires fought for survival. Out of this turmoil emerged one extraordinary man. A young artillery officer from a small Mediterranean island who would change history forever. His name was Napoleon Bonaparte. Within just a few years, he transformed himself from an unknown soldier into Emperor of France, conquering much of Europe, defeating history's greatest armies, rewriting laws, and inspiring millions. Yet, his unstoppable ambition eventually led him into disastrous wars that destroyed the very empire he had spent 2 decades building. Napoleon was born on August 15, 1769, on the island of Corsica, shortly after France had taken control of it. His family belonged to the minor nobility, but had very little wealth. As a child, Napoleon spoke with a strong Corsican accent and was often mocked by wealthier students when he attended military school in mainland France. Rather than letting the bullying defeat him, Napoleon became obsessed with studying. He read books on mathematics, history, geography, and especially the lives of great conquerors like Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar. He dreamed that one day history would remember his name alongside theirs. And at only 16 years old, Napoleon graduated as an artillery officer in the French army. In 1789, the French Revolution exploded. The monarchy collapsed. Thousands of nobles were executed. Europe's kings feared that revolution would spread across the continent. France soon found itself surrounded by enemies. But this chaos gave ambitious young officers the chance to rise quickly. Napoleon proved himself brilliant in battle. At the siege of Toulon in 1793, he used his artillery so effectively that the British fleet was forced to withdraw. Overnight, he became a national hero. At just 26 years old, Napoleon was given command of the French army of Italy. His soldiers were starving, poorly equipped, and badly paid. Napoleon addressed them with unforgettable words. "Soldiers, you are hungry and naked. I will lead you into the richest plains in the world." The army believed him. Over the next year, Napoleon defeated one Austrian army after another, attacking larger forces before they could unite. His speed shocked all of Europe. Within months, Austria was forced to sue for peace. Napoleon became the greatest general in France. In 1798, Napoleon launched an invasion of Egypt. His goal was to weaken Britain's trade routes to India. Although Napoleon won spectacular victories, including the famous Battle of the Pyramids, the British Navy under Horatio Nelson destroyed the French fleet at the Battle of the Nile. Napoleon found himself stranded. Yet instead of returning home, Napoleon brought scientists, engineers, and scholars to study Egypt. During this expedition, French soldiers discovered the Rosetta Stone, which later allowed historians to decipher ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. Back in France, politicians fought among themselves while the economy struggled. In 1799, Napoleon secretly returned to France and led a bloodless coup. Soon afterward, Napoleon became first consul, the most powerful man in France. He reorganized government, improved education, strengthened the economy, created the Bank of France, and introduced the famous Napoleonic Code. Many countries still base parts of their legal systems on these laws today. In 1804, Napoleon decided that being first consul was not enough. He crowned himself Emperor of the French. During the ceremony inside Notre Dame de Paris, he famously took the crown from the Pope's hands and placed it on his own head. The message was clear. No one, not even the Church, had given him power. He had earned it himself. From 1805 onward, Napoleon's empire expanded at astonishing speed. One coalition after another tried to stop him: Austria, Russia, Prussia, Britain, each believing they could defeat France, each underestimating Napoleon. At the Battle of Austerlitz, often called his greatest victory, Napoleon crushed the combined armies of Austria and Russia. His tactical brilliance became legendary. Soon, France controlled much of Europe, from Spain to Poland. Kings were removed from their thrones. Napoleon placed his brothers and loyal allies in charge of conquered nations. For a moment, it seemed unstoppable. But only Britain refused to surrender. The British Navy ruled the seas. In 1805, Admiral Horatio Nelson defeated the French and Spanish fleets at the Battle of Trafalgar, ending Napoleon's dream of invading Britain. Unable to defeat Britain militarily, Napoleon attempted economic warfare. He created the Continental System, banning European nations from trading with Britain. But instead of destroying Britain, the blockade damaged European economies and created deep resentment against French rule. In 1812, Napoleon made the greatest mistake of his life. Russia ignored the Continental System. Napoleon responded by invading with over 600,000 soldiers, one of the largest armies ever assembled. The Russians avoided major battles. Instead, they retreated, burning crops, villages, and supplies as they went. When Napoleon finally reached Moscow, the city had been abandoned. Then it caught fire. With winter approaching and no food available, Napoleon ordered a retreat. It became one of history's greatest military disasters. Freezing temperatures, starvation, disease, and constant Russian attacks destroyed the Grand Army. Only a fraction of his soldiers returned home. The myth of Napoleon's invincibility had ended. After the Russian disaster, Napoleon's enemies sensed weakness. Britain, Russia, Prussia, Austria, Sweden, the Netherlands, and several German states all joined forces against him. Despite winning several remarkable battles, Napoleon no longer had enough experienced soldiers. In 1814, Allied armies entered Paris. Napoleon abdicated. He was exiled to the Mediterranean island of Elba. Many believed his story was over. They were wrong. Less than a year later, Napoleon escaped. He landed in France with only a small group of followers. As royal troops marched to arrest him, Napoleon walked toward them alone. He declared, If any of you wishes to kill your emperor, here I am." Instead of firing, the soldiers joined him. Napoleon marched triumphantly back into Paris. For 100 dramatic days, he ruled France once again. Europe prepared for one final battle. On June 18, 1815, Napoleon faced the combined armies of the Duke of Wellington and General Blücher near the Belgian village of Waterloo. Heavy rain had delayed Napoleon's attack. The fighting lasted all day. Just as victory seemed possible for Napoleon, Prussian reinforcements arrived. French lines collapsed. Napoleon's empire was finished forever. This time, there would be no escape. Napoleon was sent to the remote Atlantic island of St. Helena, thousands of miles from Europe. There, he spent his final years dictating his memoirs and reflecting on his extraordinary life. On May 5, 1821, Napoleon died at the age of 51. His last reported words included, France, Army, Head of the Army, Josephine. Napoleon conquered most of continental Europe and built an empire stretching from Madrid to Moscow. He defeated coalition after coalition through military genius, transformed France's legal and administrative systems, and influenced warfare for generations. Yet his ambition ultimately outgrew his resources. The failed invasion of Russia and the united resistance of Britain, Prussia, Austria, the Netherlands, and Russia brought down the empire he had built. More than 2 centuries later, Napoleon remains one of history's most studied military commanders. To some, he was a tyrant driven by endless conquest. To others, a visionary reformer and strategic genius. Whatever the judgment, his rise and fall reshaped Europe and left a legacy that still influences politics, law, and military strategy to this very day.